The first time my family erased me, my father did it in less than 10 seconds. "You are no longer a Carter." Then the line went dead. No shouting. No argument. Just the quiet click of a call ending and a piece of a life being cut away as though it had never existed. I was 19. I had just refused to sign the marriage contract my father had arranged with one of his business partners. Not because I was being rebellious, but because I knew what that man was doing. He was laundering money through a shell company registered in my father's network. I couldn't prove it then. Not yet. For a long time after that, silence followed me everywhere. Birthdays passed without messages. Holidays came and went without invitations. My cousin got married. My aunt passed away. I learned about all of it from strangers online. But time has a strange way of turning silence into fuel. 3 years later, I stood in a glass office tower in downtown Seattle, 28 floors above the street, watching the morning light spill across a city that never once asked where I came from. The name on the frosted door behind me read Carter and Vale Legal Consulting. My firm. I built it case by case, client by client, night after night, when the cleaning crews were the only other people still in the building. I didn't inherit anything. I built everything. But I also learned this: building is not enough. You have to understand what you're building on. That's why, 3 years ago, the week I first signed the lease for this office, I hired the best corporate attorney in Seattle to go through every page of my company's founding documents. And that's why I knew exactly which clause could be used against me. And exactly what we had done to it. The reception bell rang at 9:15 in the morning. Lily, my assistant, rarely looked surprised. She had worked in legal offices long enough to see nearly everything. But when she glanced through the glass wall of my office, her fingers froze above her keyboard. "Elena," she said slowly, her voice pulled tight. I stepped out. "What is it?" She swallowed. "Your family is here." For a moment, the words didn't make sense. My family didn't visit. My family didn't call. My family had declared I no longer existed. But when I walked into the reception area, there they were. My father, Thomas Carter, stood in the center of the room as though he owned the entire floor. Immaculate gray suit. The same controlled expression he used whenever he wanted a room to bend around him. Beside him stood my mother, Linda, smiling in that polished way she used when she wanted to appear warm while quietly calculating how much damage she could do. And half a step behind them was Ryan, my younger brother. He looked older than the last time I'd seen him. Tired. His eyes moved across the office walls, the waiting clients, the framed certificates. Something uneasy flickered across his face. I didn't recognize it right away. But later I would understand exactly what it was. Guilt. 2 clients sat in the waiting chairs. A woman holding a stack of contracts and a man scrolling through his phone. Both of them looked up when my father spoke. "There she is," he said loudly, as though we were old friends. I didn't rush toward him. I didn't raise my voice. I simply walked to the reception desk and stood across from him. "Do you have an appointment?" The room went very quiet. My father's smile tightened. For half a second he looked as though he might laugh, but then he reached into his leather folder and placed a document set firmly on the counter. The sound carried through the office. "You will sign this today," he said. Lily flinched beside me. I didn't touch the folder. I simply looked down at the first page. Management Integration Agreement. My firm's name printed across the top. Carter and Vale Legal Consulting. And beneath it, in bold language written to sound official, a clause appointing Thomas Carter as managing director. My mother leaned closer to the counter, her voice gentle and poisonous. "You built something lovely, Elena," she said softly. "But businesses belong within families. This will make everything proper again." I lifted my eyes to meet hers. "You disowned me," I said calmly. Her smile didn't move. Families say things when emotions run high. My father tapped the contract with one finger. Sign it. And if I don't? His voice lowered, but he made certain the waiting clients could still hear him. You are renting this office, he said. You do not own this floor. One call to the building owner and your lease disappears. The woman holding the documents went still. The man with the phone looked up slowly. My father enjoyed the silence. He always had. I studied his face for a long moment. The confidence. The certainty that I was still the same daughter he had dismissed years ago. The one who needed his approval to breathe. Then I nodded once. All right, I said. He blinked. My mother blinked. Ryan's head came up. Call him. My father's smile returned instantly. Bright. Triumphant. You are finally learning how the world works, he said. He pulled out his phone and pressed the speaker button. The phone rang once. Twice. Then a calm male voice answered. Daniel Mercer. My father leaned toward the phone, confidence pouring back into his voice. Mr. Mercer, this is Thomas Carter. I'm calling about your tenant, Elena Carter. There are serious concerns about her business operations here. He paused for effect. And unless she agrees to a management restructuring, I expect you'll want to reconsider her lease. Across the desk, I folded my arms and waited. Because Daniel Mercer wasn't just the building contact. He was my business partner. And my father had no idea. The confidence on my father's face shattered after a single sentence. Thomas, Daniel Mercer said, his voice calm and cold through the phone. I've been waiting for this call. The entire room froze. My father paused, only half a second, but I saw it clearly. The moment he realized the script in his head was no longer unfolding the way he had written it. Waiting, for this call, he repeated, trying to keep his voice steady. Daniel didn't answer immediately. I could hear the soft rustle of papers on the other end of the line. My question is simple, Daniel said. Who authorized you to bring a management contract into this building and use my name to pressure one of my tenants? My mother's brow tightened slightly. The polished smile on her lips thinned. My father pushed back with a short laugh. Daniel, I'm Elena's father. This is a family matter. No, Daniel replied flatly. You are standing in this building threatening a registered business with a contract containing misrepresented clauses. The air in the waiting room grew heavy enough that I could hear the hum of the ventilation system. Above us. The woman holding the documents gripped them tighter. The man in the suit slowly set his phone face down on his knee, watching my father. My father inhaled deeply, trying to reclaim control. Elena is operating a company inside this building, he said, his voice sharpening. If she refuses to cooperate with her family, I may have to report several lease violations. Behind him, Ryan shifted. I saw his shoulders tense. Daniel exhaled slowly. Thomas, he said, his voice lower now. You are not speaking to a landlord you can intimidate. My father frowned. What exactly do you mean by that? I've already read the contract you sent last night. This time my father truly froze. Sent. You emailed it to the building management address, Daniel continued. But you used the wrong inbox. Not the property management office, the personal investment address I use exclusively for fund partners. A quiet pause stretched through the room. Then Daniel spoke again. There was an interesting line in that email, he said. You wrote that your daughter would sign if enough pressure was applied. Otherwise you would force the building to evict her. My father immediately pushed back. That sentence is taken out of context. No. It was written very clearly. The atmosphere in the room shifted. The people watching were no longer curious. Now they were suspicious. Ryan stepped forward, his voice unsteady. Dad, you didn't actually send that email, did you? My father didn't answer him. He kept his eyes on the phone. Mercer, this has nothing to do with you. This is a family issue. Family? Daniel repeated. A short pause. Then he spoke slowly. If you were truly proud of your daughter, you would not be standing in her office trying to take her company. The sentence dropped into the room like a stone. My mother quickly stepped in, her voice soft as silk. Mr. Mercer, you misunderstand. We only want a seat at the table. Elena would not be where she is today without her family. Daniel answered immediately. Then you should be proud of her. My father lost patience. Enough, he said. If you refuse to cooperate, I'll call the city. I'll report every violation she has made. Daniel cut him off. If you file false complaints as retaliation, it will be documented as commercial harassment. My father scoffed. You think I'm afraid of a building's lawyers? Daniel was quiet for a moment. Then he said the sentence that changed everything. I'm not talking about the building's lawyers. My father frowned. Then whose? I'm referring to the compliance division of the investment fund that owns this building. My father glanced around the office, as though realizing for the first time that this place was not as simple as he had assumed. Daniel continued. And while we're being clear about things. He paused. Elena isn't just renting office space here. My father's brow tightened. She holds the master lease for the entire floor. A beat of silence followed. Then Daniel delivered the final line in the same steady voice. And she is also one of the investors in the fund that owns this building. The phone on the reception counter suddenly felt very heavy. My father stood completely still. My mother blinked. Ryan lifted his head and looked at me, and for the first time there was genuine shock in his eyes. I remained where I was, hands resting lightly on the counter. I didn't need to say anything. The truth had already spoken. Daniel turned his attention to me. Elena, he asked, are you safe? I'm fine, I replied. Do you want me to call security? I looked at my father. The man who once told me I was no longer part of the family. The man who had just tried to take my company in the middle of my own office. Yes, I said quietly. I want them to leave. Daniel answered immediately. Understood. The call ended. Silence lingered for several seconds. Then my father looked down at the folder on the counter as though it had just betrayed him. When he raised his head again, his eyes had changed. Darker. Sharper. You think you've won? He whispered. I didn't answer. Because at that exact moment, my phone vibrated in my pocket. A notification from my firm's legal monitoring system. An urgent flag had just been triggered. Unauthorized ownership transfer attempt detected. Source IP traced to a device registered under Thomas Carter LLC. Submitted by Thomas Carter. I looked up at my father. And for the first time that morning, I smiled. Dad, I said softly. You just made a very big mistake. The notification changed everything. My father had just tried to take control of my company, from inside my own office, using a device registered under his own name. This wasn't an impulse. This was a plan. And that was exactly why it wasn't going to work. My father noticed the shift in my expression. His eyes narrowed slightly. What is it? He asked. I slipped the phone slowly back into my pocket. You just submitted an ownership transfer request for this firm, I said. The words landed like a hammer. Ryan turned toward him instantly. My mother blinked. But my father didn't look surprised. Not really. Instead, a thin smile moved across his face. So you finally noticed. The calmness in his voice sent a cold wave through the room. Ryan turned toward him. Dad, what are you talking about? My father adjusted the cuff of his sleeve like a man preparing for a meeting, not a confrontation. Elena built this firm using family connections, he said smoothly. It's only fair the family receives control. I laughed. The sound escaped before I could stop it. Family. The word moved through me like an old wound reopening. Family? I repeated quietly. Memories flashed behind my eyes. The night I was told to leave. The door closing behind me. My mother's silence. Ryan standing at the end of the hallway, watching without a word. And my father's voice, cold and final. You are no longer part of this family. And now here he stood, talking about fairness. Ryan stepped forward slowly. His voice trembled. Dad, you didn't actually file the transfer, did you? My father didn't answer right away. Instead, he looked directly at me. There is a clause in your company registration, he said. A founding shareholder priority clause, triggered in the event of a change of control. My stomach tightened. Yes. There was. When I was young and desperate and still hoping my father might support me if I succeeded, I had signed the original incorporation documents without reading every line. My father had put his own attorney on the drafting. I thought that was generosity. It was a trap waiting to be set. The founding shareholder priority clause, defined in the documents to include immediate family members once the company exceeded a certain revenue threshold. A threshold I had crossed 2 years ago. My mother finally spoke, her voice gentle, but sharp. Elena, don't make this difficult, she said. Your father only wants to guide the company. Guide it straight into his control, I replied. My father raised his chin slightly. That depends on you. Ryan looked between us, confusion spreading across his face. What does the clause actually say? He asked. My father answered before I could. A legal pathway that allows founding shareholders to reassert control in the event company leadership becomes unstable. Ryan frowned. Elena isn't unstable. No, my father said calmly. But the law allows interpretation. The room fell silent again. Then I spoke. You already submitted the transfer request. Yes. The admission came easily. Coldly. My heart pounded, but my voice stayed level. You know that request triggers a full compliance review. I do. You know the fund's legal division will see it. My father smiled. That is exactly why I submitted it. Ryan stepped back slightly. What are you doing, Dad? My father turned toward him with the patience of a teacher explaining something obvious. I am forcing her hand. My mother nodded slowly. Elena has 2 choices, she said softly. Sign the management agreement, or spend months fighting a legal challenge. Ryan looked horrified. That's blackmail. No, my father corrected. That's negotiation. My phone vibrated again. Another message from the legal system. Transfer attempt flagged. Internal legal team reviewing. Estimated review initiation, 5 minutes. I exhaled slowly. 5 minutes. My father noticed the change in my expression. You see, he said quietly. The system is already moving. He leaned slightly closer across the reception counter. You built something impressive, Elena, he said. But you built it on foundations you didn't fully understand. His voice dropped lower. And now those foundations belong to me. Ryan shook his head slowly. This is insane. But my father was watching only me. Waiting. Expecting fear. Expecting surrender. I looked back at him. And I recognized something. He wasn't entirely wrong. The clause existed. It was real. For years it had sat there like a mine waiting to be triggered. But 3 years ago, when I hired an attorney to go through every document, we had found it. And we had amended it. In a way my father didn't know about. I reached for the phone on the desk and dialed a number from memory. The call connected almost immediately. Elena? Daniel Mercer's voice answered. Yes, I said calmly. My father just triggered the shareholder clause. There was a brief pause on the line. Then Daniel asked one question. Did he submit the ownership transfer request? Yes. A quiet chuckle came through the phone. Good. My father frowned slightly. What's so funny? He asked. I looked at him. And for the first time since this had begun, I felt completely calm. Because there was one detail my father had missed. The founding shareholder clause existed, but the version that was currently filed, the version we had legally amended 3 years ago with full regulatory approval, did not grant control to family members. Instead, any claim made under that clause triggered a full compliance audit of the party invoking it. Their financial records. Their business history. Their liabilities. Daniel spoke again, his voice calm and almost amused. Elena, he said, you might want to step back. Why? Because once the audit begins. He paused briefly. Your father's entire business empire becomes part of the investigation. I looked at my father. The man who believed he had just trapped me. And I realized something quietly powerful. He hadn't walked into my office to take my company. He had walked into a trap he built himself. And in less than 5 minutes, the system would close around him. The first security guard stepped through the glass doors just as my father's confidence began to crack. He didn't notice it at first. None of them did. But I saw the moment clearly, the subtle shift in his eyes when he realized the room was no longer bending around his control. 2 guards entered the reception area, calm and professional, their dark uniforms sharp against the pale marble floor. They didn't rush. They didn't raise their voices. They simply walked in with the quiet certainty of people who already understood the situation. My father turned toward them slowly. What is this? He asked. One of the guards spoke in a firm but respectful tone. Mr. Carter, we've been asked to escort you out of the building. My father laughed, a short, sharp sound. You must be joking. The guard didn't react. This request comes directly from building management. My father's jaw tightened. Behind him, my mother crossed her arms, her composure still carefully polished. This is unnecessary, she said. We're here visiting our daughter. The guard looked at me. Miss Carter? I met his eyes and nodded once. Yes. I want them to leave. Ryan shifted uneasily. All color had drained from his face. Maybe we should just go, he murmured. But my father didn't move. His mind was still racing, calculating, searching for control. You cannot remove me, he said firmly. There is an active legal matter involving this company. The second guard spoke this time. That may be true, sir. But you are currently trespassing in a private office space. My father opened his mouth to respond. Then his phone buzzed. The sound was small, but in the quiet room it echoed like a bell. He glanced at the screen. For the first time that day, his expression faltered. Just slightly. My mother noticed immediately. What is it? She asked. He didn't answer right away. His thumb moved across the screen as he opened the message. I watched his face carefully. The calm confidence. The tight control. The quiet superiority. It was all beginning to dissolve. What happened? Ryan asked again. My father finally spoke, his voice lower now. They've initiated the audit. Ryan frowned. Already? My father's eyes moved to me. They moved faster than expected. I tilted my head slightly. That's because the system is automated. My father stared at me like he was seeing a stranger. You knew, he said slowly. Yes. You knew the clause would trigger the audit. Yes. My mother stepped forward now, her voice sharper than before. Elena, stop this. You're putting your father in danger. I felt something strange at those words. Not anger. Not sadness. Just distance. He put himself in danger, I replied. Ryan ran a hand through his hair, clearly overwhelmed. What exactly does the audit check? He asked. No one answered immediately. Then my father spoke, his voice tight. Everything. Ryan blinked. Everything? Financial accounts, my father continued quietly. Corporate partnerships. Asset declarations. Tax records. My mother's composure cracked for the first time. That's absurd, she snapped. They can't simply investigate someone like that. They can if that person attempts to fraudulently invoke a shareholder clause to seize a registered firm, I said. My father's eyes burned into mine. You set this trap. No, I replied softly. You walked into it. The truth hit harder than any insult. Ryan slowly stepped away from our parents. You tried to take her company, he said to my father. I tried to protect our family's interests, my father shot back. Ryan shook his head. No. You tried to steal from her. Silence followed. My father's phone buzzed again. This time his face turned pale. My mother grabbed his arm. What now? He swallowed once before answering. 3 accounts have been frozen. Ryan stared. Already? The preliminary review flagged irregular transactions, my father muttered. I didn't react. I simply watched. Years ago, this man had looked at me with cold disappointment and said I would never survive without the family name behind me. Now his empire was beginning to crack open under the weight of its own secrets. My mother turned toward me, desperation creeping into her voice. Elena, you can stop this. I raised an eyebrow. Can I? Yes, she said quickly. Just withdraw the complaint. I didn't file a complaint. Ryan spoke quietly. The system did. My mother's shoulders sagged slightly. The guard stepped forward again. Mr. Carter, the first one said. We need you to come with us now. This time my father didn't argue. He looked at me one last time. And the emotion in his eyes was no longer confidence. It was something darker. Fear. You think this ends well for you? He whispered. I held his gaze. It already has. For a long moment, no one moved. Then my father turned and walked toward the exit. My mother followed stiffly behind him. Ryan lingered near the door. He looked back at me, his expression conflicted. I didn't know, he said quietly. I studied his face. For the first time in years, he looked less like the golden son of his father's empire and more like a man who had just discovered the truth about his family. I thought about the night I was pushed out. Ryan had stood at the end of the hallway. 16 years old. Eyes wet. But he hadn't said a word. Not because he didn't care. Because he wasn't brave enough. And now, looking at him, I understood that being here, in this office, following our parents into an attack against me, had been its own kind of cowardice. But I also recognized that this was the first time he had stood up. Late. But still. I believe you, I said. He nodded once, then stepped out into the hallway. The glass doors closed behind him. The reception area fell silent. I let out a slow breath. Across the desk. Lily looked at me with something close to awe. Are you okay? She asked. I nodded. Yes. But my hands were trembling slightly. I looked down at them for a moment. Victory never felt the way I had imagined it would when I was younger. I used to think it would feel like justice. Like release. Instead it felt heavy. Like the quiet realization that the man who was supposed to be my father had never really been the person I needed him to be. My phone rang. Daniel. I answered. Daniel. His voice was calm, almost warm. I assume you saw the update. Yes, I said. Your name is on the audit list. A quiet chuckle came through the line. That was inevitable. I frowned slightly. You expected this? Of course, he replied. The answer made my pulse slow instead of quicken. Daniel Mercer was not a man who walked into situations without seeing ahead. Should I be worried? I asked. No, he said gently. If anything, you should relax. I leaned back slightly against the desk. You sound very confident for someone under investigation. Daniel paused. Then he said something that made the final piece fall into place. Elena, the audit didn't start today. I blinked. What? It started months ago. The air around me seemed to shift. Explain, I said quietly. Daniel's voice remained steady. When your father began pressuring investors around your firm, certain irregular financial patterns appeared. Large transfers. Quiet acquisitions. Shell partnerships. My mind moved quickly. You were watching him. Yes. And the shareholder clause? That was simply the trigger. I closed my eyes for a moment. My father thought he had walked into my office and set a trap. But the trap had been waiting for him long before today. When he submitted the transfer request, Daniel continued, he activated the system we had already prepared. And you let him do it, I said. Yes. I exhaled slowly. Through the glass walls of the office, the city moved as it always did. Cars passing. People walking. Life continuing without pause. For years my father believed that power came from control. From intimidation. From forcing people into corners. But real power moved quietly. It waited. It watched. And when the moment came, it acted without hesitation. Daniel, I said after a moment, why is your name on the audit list? Another small laugh came. Through the phone. Because I'm one of the investigators. The tension inside my chest dissolved instantly. They listed you as an associated party, I said. Correct, he replied. Associated with the investigation team. I shook my head slowly, half amused. So my father thinks the building fund's representative is being investigated alongside him. Exactly. For the first time that day, I allowed myself a real smile. His lawyers are going to have a very confusing week. Daniel chuckled. That's one way to describe it. Silence settled between us for a moment. Then his tone softened slightly. You handled yourself well today. The words landed deeper than I expected. For a long time after I left home, I had questioned every decision I made. Every risk. Every sleepless night building this firm. Every door slammed in my face by people who thought I was nothing without my family name. But standing here now, in the center of the office I built with my own hands, I felt something quiet and powerful settle inside me. Peace. I didn't build this company to fight my family, I said. I know, Daniel replied. But sometimes success forces the truth into the open. My phone vibrated again. Another update from the legal system. Asset review initiated. Corporate accounts frozen pending verification. Multiple regulatory agencies notified. My father's empire was collapsing piece by piece. And this time, there was nothing he could do to stop it. Elena, Daniel said, breaking the silence, one more thing. Yes? Your father will likely try to contact you again. I already knew that. When he does, Daniel continued, remember something. What? You didn't take anything from him. I looked out over the skyline beyond the office windows. I know. You simply refused to let him take anything from you. We ended the call. For a while I stood there quietly, watching the afternoon light stretch across the city. Years ago I was the daughter they cast aside. The girl they said would never succeed without them. Today they walked into my office expecting to take control of my life. Instead they walked out of the building under investigation. Funny how life works sometimes. If you have ever been underestimated, doubted, or told you would never succeed, remember this. Sometimes the greatest revenge isn't anger. It's building something so strong that the people who once rejected you are forced to face the truth. And if this story meant something to you, tell me in the comments. I read every single one.